Welcome, everybody, to the stream. We're hustling around at the last minute here. This is the Counter Clipping Show for October 3rd, 2022. Counter Clipping Show number 23. I got some additional tech and stuff in, and it all showed up in the last half hour. So the only thing I actually got done was to set up this light over here, which is not where it's going, but there should be plenty of light in this room right now. So I would like to thank everybody for stopping by. I'll hop over to the comments here. Hello to everybody, as usual. Tonight, we are drinking. What are we drinking? We are drinking Glendronach 12. This is bottled at 43%, bottled in or aged in Oloroso sherry casks. It's very, very drinkable. Did not put any water in it. I probably ought to put a little bit in, but I have not because everything showed up, including the giveaway. One of the two giveaways that we'll have tonight showed up literally 10 minutes ago. So way to go, U.S. Postal Service. Thank you so much. We are still clipping La Bataille de Mont Saint Jean. We're probably going to be continuing to clip that well into Napoleonic November. So as I mentioned a couple of times, let me get the ticker going here because there's important info in the ticker. Tell me that the giveaway in the code info is in the ticker. It is not. Let me get that fixed. In the meantime, there is a code for Noble Knight, 10% off any order of $15 or more. The code is Ardwulf15. So use that to your heart's content. It will be good for the entire month of October. I am planning some kind of stream thing on October 22nd, which is the day to birthday of the of Ardwulf's Lair, but I haven't quite decided how I want to do that yet. Somebody suggested I just do a 15-hour live stream, and I'm not 100% sure I can take that. So that is probably not going to be quite that ambitious, but I got plenty of other stuff happening throughout the month here. So let me fix this real quick. And we'll have one ticker instead of multiple tickers. That would be awesome. We've got Traveler Tuesday coming tomorrow. We've got an interview about professional wargaming coming on Wednesday. We have the regular unboxing on Thursday. We have a new Harn video on Friday, and I have something planned for Saturday, but it's got to be a recorded thing, and it ain't got recorded yet. So, other business. We'll have two giveaways. I'll do one toward the end of the show and one toward the middle of the show. So stay tuned for that. They are both wargaming relevant. One could potentially be RPG relevant as well, but we'll see how that works out. There will be so I have traditionally stayed away from doing patrons only content. There was a bloopers video that I released to patrons, and then I don't know, some months later I released it for everybody, or included it in another video or something. And I'm still reluctant to do that because I want, if folks are enjoying the content, I'd like everybody to be able to see it. However, on the subject of Ardwulf Con, which is a thing that is at least getting thought about, make sure if anybody notices any technical problems, like you can't hear me or anything like that. So thanks very much, by the way, to the fine folks at Noble Knight for setting us up with that. And again, it's good all month. So that's a thing that I'm thinking about at this point, and I kind of want to get. I've thought enough about it that I want to start bouncing ideas off of people. So I think later in the month, that is scheduled currently for October 20th. We are going to do a patrons only live stream, and then I will release the video for everybody a couple days later, so everybody will be able to see it. But and everybody can submit ideas in the comments. But from an interactive standpoint, I felt like it was a better idea to maybe make that patrons only, and then open it for general comment later on. Pending approval of the time off, I am will be at Compass Expo in November in whatever Connecticut place it is held in, same place as last year. So on that note, It's I kind of felt like I wasn't going to get any more conventions this year until at least spring, right? But it looks like it's going to be able to happen. But your support would be greatly appreciated, and one of the ways you can do that is with super chats and super stickers, which will also get your comments highlighted. It is much appreciated and will be especially appreciated now. And anything you shoot me in the next couple of shows um, will help toward the effort to get me to Compass Expo and back. The good news is I don't have to buy a lot of games because I kind of bought them all. So I've got most of them already. So before we get too deep into this, I am remiss. I got to find the stuff here. Let me give a big shout out to Abraxas MF, our newish moderator, Andrew Frankie, Bayonet Brant from the Armchair Dragoons, Christopher Prest, Aggie Cricktal, the legendary Fucko, James Whitmer, Jeff Beeler, John Longshore, our longtime moderator, Carl Crater from the Wargame Bootcamp, Kilroy of Kilroy was here, Manders, Marty Sample, Matt Taylor, Mike Anthony, Mo from Mo's Game Table. Thanks, Mo, for coming. Pete Bartlett from Multiman Publishing. Phil Hatfield, Stigler is in the house, Tim Greenshaw, Todd Walser, and Vince Ree. And the garbage YouTube thing is not showing me a whole bunch of information. So, John Longshore, thanks very much. That is much appreciated. Viper Dave, Andrew Cook. Let's see who else I can get that YouTube didn't feed me. Manders, I think I got you. Vince Ree, I think I didn't get you. Welcome back. Iggy Cricktal, Tim Greenshaw, Thomas Bandy, the one true Phlegm, E4 Airman, Michael Simon, SW, Steve, thanks for stopping by. Sheen Dogu, welcome to the stream. Corey Hanlon, 6 Actual. So there's like a lot of people. Doug Blayart, Lind Pratt from sunny Central Ohio. It actually was sunny Central Ohio today. Dicey Odds, John Stanley, Jeffrey Edwards, Vicky, welcome back. Chris K. William Bird, if I didn't get you already. Board Gaming Geezer, we all feel like that most of the time. Daniel Barney, Ronald Nicholson, Daniel Teets, that's how I'd pronounce that. Let me know if that's wrong. Lee Grant, Rick Cox, Cole Bieri, Jeff Anderson, Michael Schmaus, welcome back. Haven't seen you in a while. Rudy Armendariz. There's like so many people here. Holy cow. Ken 10 or Ken X. Alistair Logie, welcome back. Bama retired grunt Scott Blanchett, welcome back as well. Frank Seuli, I think and Toil is back as well. I think that's everybody. It's hard to tell. I'm supposed to get like this thing that shows me the people in the chat, only it sucks. So that's damned unfortunate. So thanks very much, John. It's always, as always, much appreciated. We can actually start clipping counters and drinking scotch now. That would be awesome. So I'll give everybody a couple of updates before we get into the topic, which is strategic level World War II. Oh, whoa. Daniel Silverthorne, thank you so much. Much appreciated. I'm going to ditch. We'll do something with the door. Okay. I'm going to ditch the cards for what I'm clipping and what I'm, I'll still tell people what I'm clipping and what I'm drinking. But that's a little more structure than I need. And it is not aesthetically pleasing the way the frame looks right now. Once I get the door taken care of, I will. And you'll notice that the camera angle is a little bit different. That is because of the new camera mount, which costs like $2. And it took me 3 days to put up. So, and of course that happened today, but that at least didn't happen 20 minutes ago. The camera is just a little bit farther away. It's also slightly higher, but that might be a lot harder to notice. So we do have some wargaming news this week. For one thing, Revolution Games has a new game out for sale. It is called A Greater Victory, and it is part of the Blind Swords system. Let me get a cut for these. It is part of the Blind Swords system. It's the Herman Luttman system, but I don't think that Herman is the game designer on that. This is South Mountain. Taking over for the legendary, not that anybody can take over for Rick Barber, but, somebody's got to do the maps. Will be Edmund Hudson, and counters as usual by Charlie Kibler. So I have ordered that. You will see an unboxing of it whenever it shows up. Alan Salazar, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Vince Ree, also much appreciated. I kind of wanted to get a 15-year-old bottle of scotch, which I can do for less money than it sounds like, and it just wasn't happening right now. So that's on sale from Revolution Games. It looks really good. MMP had a weekend sale on Ziploc games. There is a Ziploc games section on the website. They're all still on sale until midnight tonight. I assume Eastern. Um, on that list is the Greatest Dago Juno and Sword in a Ziploc. I mean, it's not like you can get it all in the box anyway, right? So, oh yeah, thumbs up and subscribe and support and all that jazz. Thank you very much for your support. And Jeff Beeler, thank you so much. That is also much appreciated. I don't have the overlays on here on this new camera screen yet, so I'm like half set up for this screen. Who's talking about Farrah Fawcett in my chat? What's going on here? I know we're all oldsters, but Jesus. Yes, this was, in fact, my exact thought was Glenfiddich 15. It's not particularly expensive. It's just that we have no furniture. So we had to, there were some things that had to get done, and none of them were free, and they were all more important than buying me a 15-year bottle of scotch. Now, it is possible that that will still happen. It just didn't happen in time for this week. Glenfiddich is also my favorite Glenfiddich expression, of at least of the standard bottlings, the 12, the 15, and the 18. I think it's the best one overall, and by a lot, the best one for the price. So, very good. Doug Lair picked up Bastogne and No Question of Surrender. I didn't see a Revolution Games sale. Well, no, I take that back. There was some stuff on sale too, and I didn't write it down. I actually just signed. Holy cow! I just signed up for the Revolution Games newsletter, which for some reason I hadn't signed up for before. So, Jeff Beeler, thank you so much. Please do thumbs up. Scott, thank you so much. That is hugely, hugely, hugely appreciated. That will go a long way towards me having a pleasant drive to and from Compass Expo. And Chad Canady as well. Thank you so much. This is all very much appreciated. And if I didn't mention it, yes, there's giveaways later. So, yes. So this was what drew my attention to the Revolution Games stuff. They have a Facebook presence, but they don't have a Twitter presence, and I don't really like Facebook, so I spent a lot more time on Twitter. So I didn't get that. Another thing that Carl from the Wargame Bootcamp. So this was what I was looking at. Actually, they've got three TCS games that I don't have. And it's very tempting to pick those up. GD4, I think it was GD42, the Guadalcanal one, and I think there was Ariete was the other one. The Ariete is real small. The Guadalcanal one's pretty small. GD42 is a bit bigger, but just on not even magazine games, just on Ziploc games. They tell us that they will have a general sale later in the year. And for MMP, I want to say that normally happens around October, November. So yes, see, we'll be driving. So the move has actually, as a completely unforeseen consequence, made the guy I would drive with way closer, like 2 hours closer to me than he was when I was in Columbus. So, and that's a big part of the reason how I've managed to decide to go. I believe we're not talking about the same Guadalcanal game. It's not called Guadalcanal. It's called, the name that's in my head is Green Hell, and that's not what it's called. Bloody Ridge, is that what it's called? I forget. We're not going to look at the multi-man website. Corey Hanlon, thank you so much. Much appreciated. What else did we have? There was another news item that I forgot to write down, so don't know what it was now. As far as I know, GMT still stuck in customs with their latest shipment. I have Battles for the Shenandoah coming from that. William Bird clarifies that it is in fact Bloody Ridge. Kawaguchi's Gamble is a different game. I'm talking about the TCS thing. That Kawaguchi's Gamble is its own game. John Madison, welcome back to the stream. Good to have you. We'll be seeing you very soon. You should play Goss with us. That'll be fun. I'm not sure we have a slot for you actually, but it's a nice try. So what are we doing? Last Blitzkrieg. So we've had like folks out of town or, doing stuff that we couldn't play last Blitzkrieg last week. And then my back exploded again midweek. At this point, because this ultimately it's sciatic nerve, right? So the good news is that now the pain has kind of migrated away from pain and more to a throb, and migrated out of my back and into my hips, which is good and bad. On the one hand, it's a lot easier to get around, it's easier to deal with, but it is harder to sleep with it than the back thing I had, because I could just lay flat on my back and I would be even at its worst, I'd be reasonably comfortable. Um, with the hip thing, there's no comfortable position. So hopefully it'll get better tonight, because I intend to drink a significant quantity of scotch, which should help. Mo, you're driving from Texas. I don't think that's all that practical. Um, Alistair Logie says that somebody said on the War Room yesterday that the GMT stuff had finally been cleared. It is entirely plausible that they have more up-to-date information than I do, because I have not had a chance to look at that stuff. The good news is that largely, Carl, thanks so much appreciated. The good news is that largely that extra time that's getting sucked away from everything else has been spent working on the channel. So that's one reason you're going to see a good number of extra videos from me this month. There's some things that I wanted to get back to, like Traveler Tuesday. We got a Traveler Tuesday this week. I've got Harn stuff to do. I've got additional stuff on Harn other than the Kickstarter that's coming, and the new Harn quest. And I'm just behind on all. I've been behind on all that stuff for months, and the move certainly didn't help. So this is more of a adjustment to get back on track than it is a some kind of genuinely new thing. However, one thing I will say that is kind of new, I have not generally been big on doing interviews. And I'd like to do more interviews. So we've had a couple of interviews recently. I have one more. Yeah, I'd call it an interview. What's coming Wednesday is a group of folks with experience in the world of professional wargaming, and I am grilling them about how that differs from hobby wargaming, and how the experience being involved in professional wargaming differs from being in hobby wargaming. And I mean, I thought that was pretty interesting. So hopefully everybody will enjoy that. It's going to run about an hour, and it's going to be released on Wednesday. I've got another one in the can. It's not really in the can. It's filmed, but that's going to end up being more of a free-flowing conversation. So I might not call it an interview, but I will put it in the interview slot on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Jeff Beeler, thank you so much. Number of counter trays. To be truthful about it, my recommendation for GTS is baggies. Unless you want a good alternative, though, putting them in like GMT counter trays is completely hopeless. Especially for the Great Estate, which is the biggest in the series, single volume in the series. If you don't mind storing the counters outside the box, you can get. I don't have one handy to show you those dollar tree trays. They're usually $1. They might be more now. I've been having trouble finding them, even though we have like 5 local Dollar Trees. I've checked a couple of them already. Haven't seen them lately. But if you can get those, what you can do is actually sort each command into one of those trays. And then you say, you're playing the British 6th Airborne. Here's your tray. And you hand them that tray and their card to keep track of their stuff, and off you go. So if you don't mind storing outside the box, that's the best solution. If you want to store everything in the box, use baggies. Counter trays are going to be a total disaster. Trevor Just, welcome back to the stream. Yes, I'm aware of that. And in fact, we are going to be doing a remote stream with Dan tomorrow, and I hope it works. I hope it works better than it did last time. Last time it worked very, very poorly. We're going to have to do that again tomorrow, but I still plan to soldier on, and we'll see what we actually get done. Yeah, so what I did with GTS is I used the really small baggies for the individual formations, and then I put all the formations in a given command into one, I want to say, snack-sized Ziploc bag. That keeps everything organized in a similar manner. It's just not as aesthetically pleasing. Now, for those who saw the video this morning about this room that we're filming in right now, The game room is a priority, but it's like there's other priorities that are higher. So I want to make sure that I'm trying to catch up with the chat here. Professional wargaming. Yes, this is like professional wargaming for the Department of Defense and the Navy and those folks. Um, so so the game room outside, my wife had I'm not even talking about it because I want to make sure I can make it happen first. But she had a fabulous idea for that room. Like after the old house sells, news on that in a second. Then my like main uh sort of move it post move priority is going to be getting that game room in order, which is a putting up shelves and b um putting a door in the door frame that is currently just an empty hole in the wall that is going to exist to keep the cats out. And I think that's a project that I can get done in a couple of weeks. I'll probably need to have somebody come help me with the door frame that knows a little more about carpentry and putting door frames in than I do. It's the difficulty is that it is not a standard size opening. It's shorter. It's about 6 feet tall. So I can't just go buy a door. I'm going to have to build a door to fit in that opening, and that sounds like a pain in the dumper to me. So the framing itself, I can watch a YouTube video and figure out how to do that. So it's funny. SW, thank you so much appreciated. So it's funny you should mention that. As of like earlier than the last couple of days, I've got the camera mount for over the game table that I will be filming stuff at hooked up. And the stuff that I plan to film is in fact BCS AeroCore. We're playing BCS right now. I feel pretty comfortable doing that. I do still have a line on the OCS tutorial series. I have 2 fully written and vetted scripts, and I think I have most of script number 3. I have all of episode 1 recorded. I have the audio recorded. I don't have the slides, and that's the problem. There's a lot of it's not super long, but it's going to be pretty dense, and the slides are intense, and that is actually where I am stuck on that. But we will have that done at some point, right? Maybe we'll even get a Goss tutorial out of it since looks like I'm going to be playing Goss again the in February, so that would be awesome. A lot of the games aren't historical games. A lot of the games are near future hypotheticals. Some of the games probably are historical. Then watch the interview. Yeah, we will actually talk about that. So the frame is in fact not square. That's no surprise though, right? So you have to make adjustments for that. It's more than wide enough. I'm confident in my ability to frame the thing. I'm just less confident in I've never built a door from scratch before. That sounds ambitious, right? And what it sounds like it's going to be is a rectangle made out of 2x6s with a hole drilled into for the doorknob, and a completely hollow core, maybe with a support or two, and then the thinnest possible type of veneered material I can get to put on the outside. Um, so I don't know if I want to call what I'm planning to do with BCS a tutorial, but I will kind of explain as I go. And the idea is to just do a couple of it might end up being a turn of AeroCore. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work because I got the map up, but I haven't set the table up yet. I haven't set the counters up yet. So I'm not, and I haven't looked at the reinforcement schedule, the order of arrival. So I don't know how fast formations arrive. I think there's very few German formations that actually start set up on the map, and they pretty much enter on turn 1, or some of them start to enter on turn 1 at least. You can cut down doors. The trouble is that the hollow core doors, I'd be cutting off like a foot of the bottom, and that completely cuts the support off. Now, what may be possible, because those doors are cheap too, is to cut the bottom off the door and then replace it with another support that I did kind of screw together. That is a possibility. Yes. So again, on the topic of professional wargaming, Do watch the interview. It's from us. I got Sebastian Bay and somebody else from the Center for Naval Analysis, and I got Brant from the Armchair Dragoons, who's also been involved in the professional wargaming scene in the past. If I'm jumping around a little bit, I'm squirming because my hips hurt. I did also, as another upgrade, switch chairs. This chair is not squeaky, but it's a lot less squeaky than the other one was, and that was bothering even me. And I'm glad I checked the audio before we started streaming, because I set the second webcam up and OBS defaulted to the webcam microphone, and it sounds like garbage, as you'll find out when you hear the video that I filmed with it. So that's a problem. So this is good advice. I think this is good advice. So, okay. So we're going to talk about strategic level World War II. Now, this is a bit different in the sense that, comparatively speaking, I've played a decent number of these games, or at least looked closely at them and or owned them at some time in the past. So I may be able to speak. I'm not going to be quite as comprehensive as I was with North Africa, but I will have more to say on some of these individual games. And we're going to go in chronological order. And if anybody's curious, the way I do this is I download the pictures from BGG, and then I save the files with the dates in the front so that I have a chronological list of images of the titles. So the first game we got is, let's see here. Yeah, that's what I want. Is World War II European Theater of Operations. This is a 1973 release. It's a Jim Dunnigan design. And it is the earliest strategic level World War II game that I could find. I strongly suspect that there are, in fact, earlier examples, but I couldn't actually find anything that was clearly in scope for this. Let me turn this damn thing off too. I want that on for some things, but not for this. Y'all know who you're watching. All right. So World War II European Theater of Operations. This is obviously an SPI release. I've never seen this in anything but a flat tray. Incidentally, speaking of flat trays, I've expanded my SPI flats collection. With La Grande Armée. And we'll get to why I added that. I got a pretty good price on it. It was $35. And it's unpunched, and the tray is not in awesome shape, but the innards are in very nice shape. So there's reasons why I bought that aren't necessarily because I think it's the most awesome game in the world. Although it is a classic. But we're not talking about that today. So this thing, however, always showed up in the flat. Now, there is a successor game that we'll get to that was released by TSR, but I don't actually think they share a lot of DNA. I'm willing to be proven wrong, but I don't own this. I've never owned this. I've never looked through this. The successor games I have looked through. Number two is the 1974 release, and I think this is probably. I think this is the. I'm gonna use the same analogy I used yesterday in the RPG stream. This is the Mount Fuji of strategic level World War II in Europe. Okay, it's enormously influential, and every other game on this list, at some level, is an answer to this game, Rise and Decline of the Third Reich. This is originally a Don Greenwood design, but there was a redesign at some point. May have been the third, it may have been the fourth edition, may have been the second edition. I don't know. And John Prados handled that redesign. This is a seminal game. I think this game holds up pretty well, actually. And despite its fearsome reputation for complexity at the time, I think looking at it now doesn't really even seem particularly complex. Now, it got played so much that people found a lot of holes in it. And that's one reason why there are successor games to this too. But this is the Mount Fuji of games. So the analogy is that if you're in Japan, in that part of the country, any picture you see, Mount Fuji will be in the background. Mount Fuji is that important. And the only pictures that do not have Mount Fuji in the background are the pictures taken from on top of Mount Fuji. This is the Mount Fuji of strategic level World War II in Europe games. And it's been very influential on strategic level World War II in the Pacific games as well. There's a couple of things I'm leaving off this list because they're strictly naval games, by the way, like Victory in the Pacific, which is also a very good game, by the way. So we'll actually mention War Room later too, although it's not on the list, but the predecessor game is, and we can't leave it off. So you'll know it when you see it. So Third Reich, very, very important and influential game. And again, you can get copies of this very inexpensively. None of this, all of the successor games make substantial changes to it. I don't think any of them really replicate the experience for a variety of reasons, either because of completely different mechanics or a lot of extra stuff. Supremacy did not make the list. Supremacy is not World War II. Then 1976, this is War in Europe. Now, this is, of course, a combination of two earlier Jim Dunnigan designs, War in the East, which itself had 2 editions, and War in the West. And in fact, if you have War in Europe, which I have, it in fact contains 3 different rule books. It has a War in the East rule book, a War in the West rule book, and a combined rule book to play War in Europe together. The 2 games do not mesh seamlessly. Those who have seen War in Europe will remember that the production spiral system that's used in War in the East is not used in War in the West. The Western Allies, and for that matter, the Italians, are just on a reinforcement schedule. So they don't have much interesting decision making to do in the space of like production and stuff. And I always found that fairly unsatisfying. Now, of course, there is the later, what's the date on this? Decision Games War in Europe. I want to say this is about 2005, 2006. I didn't write the date down. This is a light redesign. They did make some changes. So we got to be careful when we get into these. William Aarons from Guatemala City. Thanks for stopping by. And Tony from Tony's Board Life. Thanks for stopping by as well. So a War in Europe is, I think, a good game. It's not a great game. It's like Europa in one respect, in that it is lent a great deal of majesty by virtue of its size. Okay. It's a huge game. It's not a I'm talking about War in Europe now. It's not a particularly complex game. And it's a division level World War II. There are some smaller units than divisions, but mostly we're talking about divisions. Unlike Europa, where it's a division level game that somebody said somewhere. And in fact, the vast majority of counters that you have on the map are in fact not divisions. Bob Kowalczyk, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Always appreciated. This is going to help enormously. We will, decision's not going to get a lot of good press here. I've got good things to say about a number of decision products, none of which will be discussed this evening. So the War in Europe 2nd edition, revised edition, whatever you want to call it, is a nice graphical upgrade that doesn't really fix any of the fundamental underlying issues that War in Europe has, which is that it's basically too easy to break. There's also some, I think, I will say aesthetically displeasing things, like instead of enormously high stacks, you have enormously deep fronts. And I think that feels ridiculous. There's attempts in the mechanics to kind of circumvent that. And I don't think those attempts were necessarily entirely successful. So Stigler, you have in fact made your point at this time. So next up is, I believe, 1979's War in the Pacific. So this is a game design that sounds a lot like it was designed by a committee, because the credited designers in the book, and remember, I've got this sitting on the shelf behind me, are Edward Curran, Jim Dunnigan, Irad B. Hardy, and Tom Walczyk. So this is an interesting group of designers. Okay. I have a hunch that Jim Dunnigan is credited more for the fact that there's some of the underlying mechanisms are borrowed from War in Europe. I feel like this has Irad B. Hardy's fingerprints on it more than anybody else. And I say that with affection because I think I read B. Hardy had some really interesting game designs, a lot of which got rushed through the SPI pipeline and maybe didn't don't hold together as well as they deserve to. And War in the Pacific may be one of those. It's got an extremely detailed logistics system, which is kind of one of the themes that the design team, whoever that was, wanted to explore here. And it's actually, I think, the most interesting part of the game. It's enormous. I think map wise, it's got fewer maps than War in Europe, but of course the scale's different and there's just as many pieces. I think there's more counters. And there's an enormous number of off map displays as well. So um, I think, a very interesting game. I'm glad to have it. I definitely want to actually try it at some point. But I suspect that it's not going to end up being like the best Pacific game because the best Pacific game is on the list and it's coming. Perfidious Albion is asking, did SPI have workable rules to mate War in the Pacific with War in Europe? So those rules did exist. They were published in, I forget whether it was Moves or Fire and Movement, but they were published in one of the two magazines. And I can't speak to whether they were workable or not. There's enough dissimilarities between the mechanics in the two games that it's easy to believe that it would be difficult to make it work. But those problems might not be any more challenging than it is to play War in Europe and War in the Pacific and not have it fall apart. So I have War in Europe, War in the Pacific. These are my sort of crown jewel SPI soapboxes. If anybody has an empty soapbox for War in the Pacific, by the way, I need it. My pieces are in glorious condition. The box is friggin' destroyed. So it kind of looks like the entire box was submerged into the Pacific, but somehow it was rescued before the interior parts got wet. The interior components are great. The box is clear water damage. It's dished. It's bad. So I actually have a eBay search set up for an empty War in the Pacific box, which has not come up yet. Global War is not on this list, and the basic reason for that is I'm not particularly familiar with it, so that's why. Here is Decision's much later remake, and I say remake. I'll talk about this from Decision Games and designer Kevin Kiff, who since passed away. So this is if War in the Pacific seems like an insanely ambitious Pacific game, this is insane ambition on insane steroids. Not only is this is a very close to a complete redesign for one thing. It does not resemble the original game all that much, except in terms of physical components, which do. The detailed logistics system that was in the original War in the Pacific has been completely redesigned and redesigned fairly badly, I think. You are given maps of every island in the Pacific that could potentially have been fought over in World War II. Not that was fought over, but could have potentially been fought over. If you think carefully about what that means, you've got tiny little islands that are literal atolls that are, have surface areas measured in hundreds of square meters. And you've got gigantic islands like Okinawa. So every map has a different scale. And it's not like there's like a 5-step grade or something like that. There's like at least 12 different map scales that you have to use. And of course, that affects the unit scale as well. Now, to the designer's credit, he gives you breakdowns for everything. Everything, right? You could break divisions all the way down into at least battalions and possibly companies. As a result, however, the units are all cookie cutter units, which is boring. And the counters are the map. Looks like a Joe Youst map to me. The map is very attractive. I do not like the counters. I do not like the counter layout. I'm not sure who did the counters. This is not a product I have a high opinion of. Now, the designer Kevin Kiff backed this thing to the wall, right? And he took a lot of crap for it, frankly. And I'm not sure that was the right approach to take with the designer. But um, I find the reports of this having been play tested unconvincing. The designer supposedly played the entire game beginning to end once, and that might be true. Although I think I have trouble reconciling that with the amount of time that this was in development, because of the amount of time this would take when you're fighting out each individual island battle as well, with a land system that looks truly Mickey Mouse. Um, and I wouldn't call one full playthrough playtesting. That said, I guarantee that, and people have talked about this, the original War in the Pacific, the campaign game, was not playtested all the way through either. So I looked at Avalanche Press's website today, in fact, for a game that we will see a little bit later. So the fact that they have like no visibility in the hobby is a big problem for Avalanche Press. Not our topic tonight. We're trying to stay more or less focused, although I'll be a little bit less focused tonight than I was last time. I really can't not talk about Axis and Allies. Okay. This is a touchstone for many war gamers. It's going to be the first war game, and it is a war game. I don't take seriously anybody claiming this isn't a war game. And in fact, the original Nova Game Designs, as I recall, edition of this is something like 1981. What had counters, not little plastic miniatures. So I have personally not played Axis and Allies since this actual edition. Okay. So and I have significant issues with it, but those issues there's been a million editions of this since then. Not to mention all the other side Axis and Allies, World War One, blah, 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 all that other stuff. So it's entirely plausible that my concerns with it back from the mid 80s are no longer relevant, right? I found it to be a very brittle design, in the sense that not imbalanced as such, but that you pretty much knew who was going to win after turn two. And that prognostication would hold up a lot. That said, again, it's a seminal game. It sold tons of copies. It's still in print now in multiple editions. So a lot of people love this game, and I didn't think that I could get away with not talking about it. The cover here is actually, I really love this cover, if nothing else. It sort of harkens back to like the sort of novel cover tradition from the 70s and 80s. A bit warm in here. It's probably because I have 2 million lights. If you haven't seen the 5-minute video from earlier today, by the way, check that out after the stream, because there's a fun little touch with the new lights in here. And there were people that were doing expansions for the original Nova Games version too, that you could they were then retrofitted to the later Milton Bradley versions. It is a step up from Risk. I don't know that it's a big step up necessarily, but at least it sort of corresponds to the actual planet Earth a little better than Risk does. Risk is kind of, is it vaguely Napoleonic, maybe, but then some of the iconography might not reflect that. It's really hard to say. So I think it's a more complicated game than Risk, I'll tell you that. And it's got a solid decision space too, if you think about it, because you're making decisions about production, and I don't know that it's necessarily a deep game, but it does have a lot of decisions to make. It's got, I think, a much better decision space than Risk does, for example. But I don't know. I was about to say that I don't think people necessarily stick with this, but I'm wrong, right? That's nonsense. There's like a dude on YouTube. You can go find this guy's tutorial videos for the dedicated Axis and Allies table with the built-in maps that he made so he could play better Axis and Allies. So people love this thing, and it's hard to criticize it for the level that it's at, right? Let's get some water, because we're gonna do a lot of talking this evening. Well, nobody's trying to position Axis and Allies as a simulation of any kind, right? I'm not sure I like the term beer and pretzels, but if it applies, this is a pretty good place for it to apply. All right, next is Hitler's War. This is the Avalon Hill cover, which again is a very good cover, although it is called Hitler's War, so I guess that's why Hitler is the most prominent person on the cover. This is a pretty interesting game. This is basically a really reduced, really high level hex encounter World War II in Europe game. Callendale has done some video on this, by the way, if you want to go check those things out. This was originally released by Metagaming, I think in 1981, and then sometime around 1984, it was released in a much nicer edition from Avalon Hill. This game has its fans, and it sounds like I've never owned it, never played it, but it sounds like there's some genuinely interesting mechanics in here. You do kind of have to get back to beyond the fact that hey, France is 6 hexes in this game, right? I don't know if that's actually accurate, but it's not too far off. We're going to get to Colombia as well. That choice of scale, which certainly makes it a thing you can get into this size box, but doesn't necessarily shorten playtime that much. I think this is still a 10, 15, 20-hour game. And if I'm playing at that level, at that like zoomed out level, then I'd sure like it to play faster than what it sounds like Hitler's War plays. Eastwind Rain. This was originally based on my research. This was originally a release from 3W that later moved over to Task Force Games. And this is the Task Force Games cover. Design says Mark McLaughlin, Chris Vorder Bruga. Mark McLaughlin, of course, I think we're probably all familiar with, but I'm not so sure about Chris Vorder Bruga. This is not a well-regarded game nowadays. However, if nothing else, I think this cover is pretty nice. I do like this cover art. I never owned this. It's not very big. It's a one-map Pacific War game. So if you want like a big Pacific War game, this is not it anyway. Other than that, I can't speak to it too much. This one I can speak to. This is Mark Herman's Pacific War, originally released from Victory Games in 1985. And then earlier this year, 2022, we got a very large, very new, and very shiny new edition of it from GMT, which I have played probably about 40 hours of now. This is and it's, as Mark has said repeatedly, this is really an operational game that happens to be so comprehensive that you can actually play the quote unquote strategic scenario and play out the entire war from 1941 to 1945. Now, there's a couple of caveats that I want to make on this. One is that, like the majority of the other Pacific War games on this list, and like American historiography on the Second World War, this presupposes that World War II started in 1941 in the Pacific, which it did not, right? You could make a case that it started earlier in the 30s with the Japanese occupation of Manchuria, but you can certainly make the case that it started in 1937 with the Marco Polo Bridge incident and pretty much ongoing war between China and Japan all the way through to 1945. And obviously, that's a hugely formative experience culturally and historically for China and Japan today, obviously. Nevertheless, I don't mean to specifically criticize Pacific War here. The ground game is fairly abstract. It's relatively straightforward, but it's still got kind of a lot going on. It's just not that complicated. The naval game has a lot going on and is fairly complicated, which is not surprising because at least from the American perspective, the Pacific War is the war in the Pacific theater is a naval war, right? This game is marvelous at handling that. It has some really clever mechanics and mechanisms. The telescoping scale works really well. It's really good at giving you fog of war. You don't know where the enemy is. There's blips on the map, but you don't know what's what. You have to figure it out. You have to conduct searches. It works really well. The biggest problem with it is now, and now I'm talking about the GMT version of the game. The biggest problem with it is the rule book. It's a very challenging rule book, and the index is not good. And the thing where they have like an engagement scenario rule book and a battle scenario rule book and a core rule book doesn't really pay off. So it does require a lot of patience. If you have a really strong interest in the Pacific War, I can't recommend this thing high, and the willingness to deal with a complicated game. I can't recommend this highly enough, but you kind of do need to dedicate yourself to learning it. It's a tough rule book, and I think it's tougher than it needs to be. Let me put it that way. There'll be a review of this, but we have USN is not on the list actually. Did that cover the entire war? I didn't think it did. That's why I didn't even look at it. We'll talk about that other game shortly as well. So Pacific War, I think it's not the game on the Pacific War, ironically enough. But if you have a hunger for this kind of thing, of really digging into the weeds on this stuff, then this is your best bet. If you want a higher level, more strategic thing, then the game that will show up shortly is a better bet. Okay, this is the successor game to the first game that was on the list that I mentioned earlier. This is European Theater of Operations World War II. This is from Spitzer. So SPI, while they were owned by TSR. This was a 1986 release, if I'm not mistaken. Is that accurate? I have this written down. Apparently I don't have this written down. I believe this is 1986, and the successor game, Pete, which isn't next in the list, Pete Pacific Theater of Operations was a 1991 release. So this is as far as I could tell, a near complete redesign by designer Douglas Niles, who's better known for his RPG work. Yeah, that would have been a good one, actually, Jeff Beeler. John Prados' Pearl Harbor. That would have been a good one. That one I did miss. That's a GDW game, if we're talking about the same game. Yes, this is exactly it. There may be influences from the earlier game. That's probably accurate. But this visibly feels like an answer to Third Reich, right? Nevertheless, there's some really interesting mechanisms in here. There's an activations mechanic that I really think this is why I bought the things again. I'd really kind of like to try that out. The counters, the map is okay by mid to late 80s TSR wargame standards. It's not amazing, but it's okay. The counters I don't like. They're usable, but I don't like them, and they have center nibs. I don't like the graphic design. The numbers are too small. Very common. But I think this game's got something going for it here. Now, I don't think if the same person were to play all of the options that this is going to be number one, probably not number two or number three on anybody's list. But I think there's some interesting things going on in this and its sister game PTO, which we'll take a look at in a second. Next up from Omega Games. Now, I had this pass through my hands, is Carrier War. This is an approximately Pacific War sized game, but it's frankly not as detailed and not as complicated. There was actually an expansion for this too. I think I forget what the expansion included, but it was like an extra expansion rule book, and I think one more counter sheet or something like that. Actually, this passed through my hands, and I was like, should I keep this? I don't know. I sold it. I didn't get tons for it. This might be interesting too, but from what I can tell, it's less so than a number of the other things on this list that cover the Pacific. And there's a lot of competition in the World War II strategic in Europe space, more so than World War II in the Pacific space, for a couple of reasons. There's more games on Europe, and Empire of the Sun in the Pacific. I don't know that I'm spoiling anything here, but I think the definitive World War II in the Pacific game is Empire of the Sun. And it's coming here. So Carrier War, don't know a ton about it. Omega Games, I had it. Maps look okay. I mean, it's like a early '90s game. The maps look okay. The counters look okay. There's a lot of counters. 6 counter sheets. Next up, we have East Front. Do I have these organized in a sensible way? I do not. Okay, so this is the current edition of East Front that's available from Columbia Games right now. There is a whole series of games, and you can put them together to do all of World War II in Europe. The original series, I think, had 4 volumes in it: East Front, West Front, Med Front, and Euro Front. The current series has compressed that into 3 volumes: East Front, West Front, and Euro Front. You need those 3 games to play all of World War II in Europe. Now, this is an interesting system. This is designed by Craig Basink, who's well known for block games, and Tom Douglas, who is well known for block games. This is a classic Columbia block game system, but it does not really share much beyond that. It's got a quite a different beat type mechanism in actual gameplay. So the way this works very broadly, it's been a while, so I'm doing this from memory, is you have the blocks, the sides of the blocks represent the strengths of the blocks, right? So you might have a block with 4 steps, 3 steps, 2 steps, 1 step, whatever, and your opponent, of course, can't see what that is. However, in this system, there are also HQ blocks, and the steps do not represent strength or remaining reserves or whatever; they represent activations. So you spend one of those activations on the HQ to then activate the units within activation range of the HQ, and then you move those units, and then you keep doing that back and forth. It's a pretty interesting mechanic. The resolution is a buckets of dice resolution. There's nothing wrong with that in principle, but it tends to look people. I think people tend to feel like that's aesthetically displeasing. I mean, as long as you've considered the statistical ramifications of that, there's nothing in particular wrong with it. So I am including games that you can all put together to do World War II. Okay, and there's no Pacific examples, but there are there's at least one other European example here. I mean, after all, War in Europe did that, right? Play War in the East, War in the West together. So this is exactly right. In order to do all of Europe, you need West Front and Euro Front. And then if you're playing the older editions, no idea what the differences between editions are. If you're playing the older editions, then you need Med Front as well. So on the subject, what's going on here, man? Since we are talking about Columbia Games and they came up, um, let me do my adjusting here because it is time for a giveaway. So let me pull this down, and we'll share this instead. All right. The key word for the giveaway is # or hashtag Columbia, because the prize is a $50 credit with Columbia Games. The way this will work is put that in the chat. I'll give you guys all a couple minutes while we talk about the next game. Hashtag Columbia in the chat. We'll enter you into the automated drawing system. It's a $50 credit. Basically, you'll contact me with whoever wins will need to create, if they don't have one already, create an account on Columbia Games' web store. You don't have to buy anything, just create an account and then send me the email address that you have registered with them, and then I will provide that to them, and they will provide that account with a $50 credit, which is a good chunk of is a Harn thing and a half, or it is a good chunk of any of their war games. So we'll give that a couple of minutes, and then I will do the drawing. But in the meantime, let me blather on a little bit more about next on the list. Ugh, we're gonna have to talk about this. So let me also mention, I guess, that they did a Kickstarter a couple of years ago for an enormous one-piece vinyl map for this entire thing. So all of World War II in Europe for this. It looks pretty nice. I didn't get in on it, so thanks, big thanks to Columbia Games, by the way, for supplying us with this code. And we have This isn't the last one, right? There's another giveaway tonight, which is a thing that's sitting right here that showed up 10 minutes before the stream. And then we'll have more giveaways throughout the rest of the month. So I didn't calculate for there being 5 Mondays in October, but there are. I don't have a link to the vinyl map handy, and I don't want to do that on live on stream. But if you go to their website, I think you'll be able to find it. Their website is not the most up to date and modern looking website on the face of websites, but it's not that bad, right? I managed to buy stuff through there, and I managed to manage my inventory of PDF type products. Carl from the Wargame Bootcamp, neoprene, vinyl neoprene, I don't know, whatever. But it's real nice. Of course, Columbia's as a wargame publisher is well known for block games. They have a number of very highly rated block games, which include things like Julius Caesar and Napoleon, which is an operational game about Waterloo that was good enough to get picked up by Avalon Hill, and then it went back to Columbia. The current edition is with Columbia. Very highly regarded game. One side effect of this, though, is these don't solo well because of the hidden information is a little too important to these games, these block games, to make them ideal for solo. You can still do it, of course. Maybe you're absent-minded and forgot what the other one's out. Yeah. This is true. So, all right, about another minute, and I will do the drawing. We have 92 entries, and we have 178 people watching, which is warrants a big fat holy cow for me. And that one person that watches on Twitch. Thank you, Mr. Twitch person, for watching. We have 178 people, 177 of them on YouTube, 1 on Twitch, and as usual, 0 on Facebook. The reason to do it to Facebook too is so that I don't have to schedule posts on Facebook, so that when it's live, it'll at least show up on Facebook. So if you haven't already, please follow me on social media. I am most active on Twitter at Ardwulf on Twitter. I am also on TikTok, which I really am not sure what to do with, but I have several videos that are 15 seconds or less. And I've been on Facebook for a long time, but I hate the place. It's terrible. Hammer of the Scots, mentioned by Doug Sunsets, also very well regarded. Let's try and get to an even 100 entries. You can't enter more than once. The machine here is smarter than that. This doesn't count my viewers. Well, no, it doesn't count Twitter viewers. I have about 1,800 or so Twitter followers. So any follows on Twitter are always much appreciated. Like I said, I am most active on social media on Twitter, more or less because I carefully curate that feed and am able to, generally speaking, provide myself with a positive experience. So # Columbia, 98 people in the drawing so far. That's a lot of people. $50 is a lot of bread, though, right? Even nowadays with inflation and all that. So, last chance to # Columbia. Mike Weiss has entered. When it hits 100, I'm going to do the drawing. So it is at 100. I'm going to do the drawing. Let's see what we get. Let's see who wins. And Toil is the winner of a $50 credit with Columbia Games. And Toil, please email me with whatever email address you have created your Columbia Games account for, or whatever it currently is. And I will provide that information to the fine folks at Columbia Games, and they will credit you. As usual, it is ardwulfslair@gmail.com. That is in the ticker. So back to... I got pictures of West Front and Eurofront in here too, but we've pretty much done all the talking about that. So yes, congratulations to N Toil. The Eagle and the Sun. I couldn't leave this off the list, even though it is a notorious turd from the Fresno Games Association. So you may recall that folks in the chat, this isn't that common of a knowledge, right? But people who've been around for a while do know what GMT of GMT Games stands for. And it was the initials of the first names of the three founders, Gene Billingsley, Mike Crane, and Terry Schrum. I don't know what went on there, but shortly after the foundation of GMT, Mike Crane and Terry Schrum left to found the Fresno Games Association, which, thinking about it, is in the same general geographical area as GMT. Uh, FGU produced no good games and a variety of half-finished products that were nevertheless published, and this is one of them. This is sometimes described as an attempt to redo War in the Pacific. It is sometimes said to have nice components. I don't agree with that. I think they're okay by the standards of the time. I don't think they're anything special by the standards at the time. And this is a 1991 release, right? This is Jesus, 30 plus years old now. The consensus is that this is simply not playable. Now there was a second edition rule book, which allegedly did not help very much. And then there was a third edition rule book that allegedly fixed the problems, but nobody knows where it is. It is the literal secret investor of the Eagle and the Sun. Nobody can confirm nor deny. There's people that say they've seen it, but it's nowhere online that anybody can find. Is it possible for somebody to take these components and build a good game around them? Yeah, absolutely. That is absolutely possible. But I didn't mention We Must Tell the Emperor because I don't know that that fits in the space of games we're talking about. But maybe I should have. It's a States of Siege game on the Pacific War. It's a States of Siege game on the Pacific War, and it's a good one. It's highly sought after. It may have been the same secret investor. I don't know, but the secret investors have the mysterious missing third edition rule book that vanished in a simultaneous flood and fire. So, yeah, not recommended. Nobody recommends this. I know people who have it. I've looked at the counters. I've looked at the maps. They're okay. They're probably a bit above average for 1991, truthfully, but they're not like the best counters of the era of that kind. So this is interesting. Block Oddity, thanks for the question. I at one point had a topic planned, and I think I went as far as to schedule the show. That was something like worst World War II games or something like that. And I decided after thinking about it to do something different. I'm happy to give my opinions, and sometimes those opinions turn out that this game, for example, is in fact a turd. But I don't want to orient an entire show around negativity. I want people to enjoy the hobby and have fun with the hobby, and that includes occasionally making fun of the turds in the hobby. That is okay. I just don't want to I don't want to create an entire show where I complain. Even the show I did, which was the topic at least was me complaining. I only complained for like 20 minutes. I spent the rest of the show talking about other stuff. So thanks for asking that question. That is a good question, but I have kind of made a deliberate decision to not do 10 shittiest games ever. I'm not interested in that. Do I have a list like that? Yes, and we all do. But, and if one of those comes up in conversation, I'll be happy to say, yeah, that's a bad game. But in my opinion, but I don't want to focus on negative stuff. I want to focus about I like this hobby. I like generally the people in this hobby and the games in this hobby, and I ought to enjoy those things. So this is well, Stigler, I don't know if it's me that's introducing the negativity into the conversation, but all right, here is PTO, Pacific Theater of Operations. Again, Doug Niles' design. I think there's some interesting things in this game. And we'll get to another step along the evolution of this topic in a minute here. I think, well, let me, I guess I should introduce it now. So there have been a number of games that have been released where it's like, here's a Europe game and here's a Pacific game. And there's a couple different ways to do that. One of which is the SPI way, where they're really not particularly similar games, except in very broad ways. And in order to make them work together, you have to kind of do some very loosey goosey thing or construct this elaborate edifice of rules to make it work. Which is, they did the loosey goosey thing, by the way, in the magazine. Um, this is an integrated Europe and Pacific game that I think works better than average. Um, there's again some interesting things. The activation mechanic works pretty well in the Pacific, I think. I think there's some things to like about this. Are these perfect games? No. These are also not going to be on the top of anybody's favorite World War II games list. But I think there's some things to be said for these games. Let me put it that way. All right. Next, we have Advanced Pacific Theater of Operations. This is the Decision Games re-release. And so let me caveat, I thought I had an picture of Advanced ETO in here too, but maybe I don't. So Decision Games released advanced versions of ETO and PTO because they inherited those when they bought the rights from TSR. Again, these are basically total redesigns, and pretty much the biggest similarity is that they thoughtlessly copied the unattractive counter layouts from the TSR games, and I don't know why that was a bizarre decision. They also massively bloated both games, more so in the Pacific than in Europe. All that said, caveat that there are a small, but there are some folks who are extremely happy with Advanced ETO and Advanced PTO. Last I checked, you could still get Advanced PTO from Decision, but Advanced ETO has been out of print for a long time and is quite expensive on the secondary market. I don't consider these to be necessarily superior to the earlier TSR versions, because even though there's more detail, I don't know that that doesn't necessarily make them better games. William Aarons, thank you so much. Much appreciated. What World War II strategic game would be the best for our beginning wargamer such as Santiago or myself? We will be getting to that in a few minutes. So there is such an entry on this list. Advanced PTO, not recommended by me, but there are people who really, really like it. Not as many people as that really like Risk. Well, obviously Risk, Whiff, or a World at War, but there are fans of this thing. Now we step into sort of the direct lineage of Third Reich. Okay, a lot of these games are answers to Third Reich. A couple of them not so much, but you'll see those in a minute. This is the direct successor to Third Reich. Design credit on this was, I think, Bruce Harper, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Design credit on this was Bruce Harper, and who is the current steward of the whole thing of A World at War. This is basically, it took a lot of the lessons of having played Third Reich and found a lot of holes in it for 10 or 15 years and patched all those holes. In many cases, the holes were patched with more rules, right? But nevertheless, I think that Advanced Third Reich adds something to the game. It adds a much more involved diplomacy system and a parallel research system that I really like, and which is not really duplicated anywhere else in the list here. So there's a couple of like little elements that I think you could consider that you might want in this kind of game, right? You have the ground war, the naval war, the air war. Maybe that one of the more of those is abstracted more than the others. You also have the diplomacy and the research and the history, the pre-war stuff that led to World War II. There is no, we'll call it a prologue game for Advanced Third Reich and its companion game, Empire: The Rising Sun. This is credited to Bruce Harper and a couple of other people. This is credited to Tor Abrahamson, Dave Casper, and Bruce Harper, at least according to BGG. I haven't owned this in a long time. So I have, however, played these two games, Rising Sun and Third Reich. I got to say that while there were some concessions made to make the Third Reich naval system work in the Pacific, it does not work in a particularly satisfying way. That particular aspect of it is better in A World at War. But in order to get that, you have to then deal with all the additional baggage that A World at War brings to the table. That is, of course, the current GMT game that is the successor to Advanced Third Reich and Rising Sun. Make sure I didn't miss anybody here. So yeah, this is second edition West Front, second edition Euro Front. Those are the three games you put together to get them all together. Don't forget, we do have another giveaway later in the show too, so bear that in mind. Okay, here's the very small, very crappy picture of advanced ETO. This is the one that's been out of print for a long time. Again, there's people that really like this thing. It's I think it's way more complicated than is warranted by what it brings to the actual table. That's my in the context of that in comparison with the alternatives. Um, I guess not particularly surprise anybody when I say that of all the games we're going to talk about here, my favorite that's at least that covers the whole world is World in Flames. Okay. I think Empire of the Sun does a better job handling the Pacific, but I think WIF does a pretty good job handling the Pacific. And you can also put Europe in there as well. And I think that's the game that most succeeds at the compromises necessary to make the same system run Europe and run the Pacific. Krieg. So this is the original Krieg that was released in the mid 90s by Decision Games. We poo-pooed this at the time. I don't know if this original edition can really be considered a card-driven game or not. But the current edition, Axis Empire's Total Krieg and Axis Empire's Die Senso, are certainly not card-driven games in the conventional sense. The cards represent your strategic and economic and diplomatic decisions. And you don't have a hand, you have the whole deck, and whatever you meet the prerequisites for, you can play. And then you actually play the game out that is then impacted by the decisions that you made through the card play. This actually works really well. But I don't know how true this is of the first edition. I think I had this one, Totaler Krieg, which I think does more closely resemble the current version, which is Axis Empire's Totaler Krieg. And this is the one that I've actually played. However, there are things that were taken out of Totaler Krieg that existed in Totaler Krieg but didn't make it into Axis Empire's Totaler Krieg. And one of those things is this sort of random scenario generator. I don't know how detailed this system is, but it basically gives you a randomized set of tables you can play through that pre-war scenario on. So you could potentially have a lot of really different stuff happen. And I think that's fascinating. Doug says that it was obviously a direct response to Third Reich. Obviously, I agree. So I think these are very good games. Axis Empire's Totaler Krieg and Die Senso. I think Totaler Krieg is the better of the two. I think the abstractness of the air and naval systems don't lend themselves well to the Pacific. But you could certainly play them both together and have a great experience with it. I just think Die Senso on its own is less strong. These are a lot of fun to play. Probably 20 hours to play through one of these. I'd say if you're playing with 4 people on both games, you could get that done in 25 hours. I think so. It's a comfortable weekend to get. Well, I don't know. It's a focused weekend campaign, right? I think that this is a very good game. Now there's a new edition of it coming from Decision. At some point, it is at least 3 years late. So this is another one that's not my personal favorite, but I do recommend it. I think it's a very good game. Or pair of games, I should say. The new edition, by the way, will have both theaters in the same box. And it might, in fact, as somebody suggested, it might, in fact, cost $240. In fact, it may be more. But it is a good game. Now, the earlier, this is a significant evolution on the earlier editions, okay? Especially from that very first edition, which, again, like I said, we poo-pooed that at the time. So there's a game on the list that's coming called Struggle for Europe. But there's also a series called Struggle for Europe from Clash of Arms. And this is pretty interesting. So where you have Totaler Krieg and a lot of these other games, Advanced Third Reich, these are 2 map games per theater, okay? So you got 2 maps for Europe, 2 maps for the Pacific. And although there's more maps than that in WIF, that's basically the setup. In this Struggle for Europe series, the scale's a little lower. So you actually have two maps for the East Front, two maps for the West Front, and I think something like a map or a map and a half for the Mediterranean. There's three games in the series: War Without Mercy, which is the East Front, um, Brute Force, which is the West Front, and then either of which stand alone, but you can combine them. And then there's the Mediterranean, very unimaginatively titled non-standalone version that you need the other two to play. But if once you do that, you could play out the entire war on a map that is the kind of the next best thing to, size wise, to war in Europe, right? You're looking at a 5 to 6 map Europe game, and that's a sizable game. I've talked to some people who have played these. I haven't played these. I understand that these are worthwhile. They're not the most attractive games by any means, but um they're physically, in terms of maps and counters, I think the counters are a bit much. I think the maps look pretty good, but nevertheless, this is a very interesting looking series, and I have seriously considered picking these up. Daniel Barney, thank you so much appreciated. Assistance for the Please Help the Poor Person Go to Compass Expo fund. So there's a lot. Yes, there is mucho testosterone in these game titles. I don't know that that's new this week, however, to be fair. So, all right. So next on the list, we've got Fire in the Sky, The Great Pacific War. This is by Tetsuya Nakamura, a Japanese designer. This is the more recent edition from Phalanx. I think the original edition of this came out from Game Journal in 1999. It was picked up by Multiman, in which did an edition of it in 2005, and then just last year, Phalanx put it out too. Now, this is a pretty abstract game, pretty fast playing game. I haven't experienced it. I didn't get an image of it because I was crunched at the last minute, but I think this is a very good cover. However, I think the previous MMP cover is actually better, and that may be one of the few examples. I think MMP's covers, I mean, we could talk about this, but I don't want to derail the topic either. I think MMP's not the greatest at covers. I think generally their covers are to okay. That Fire in the Sky cover was a very strong cover. And this is a pretty good cover too. I don't think it's as strong. This is a well-regarded game. Obviously, it got picked up in a big fancy box with big fancy pieces and big fancy price tag. So people clearly like this game. It's got a lot of fans. World in Flames. If you want to research the edition history of World in Flames, by the way, I cannot recommend strongly enough not going to Board Game Geek to do that, because it's a total mess. As far as I can tell, first edition of World in Flames came out in 2000. And this is a picture of, attached to that edition from 2000 is this picture of World in Flames Collector's Edition Deluxe, which came out of 2016 or something like that. This is the current edition of World in Flames. It's a great package. It's a great game. It's the size of a hearse. So it's got 6 mounted boards in it. It's absolutely bananas. And I think it's one of the reasons why Whiff is my favorite here is I think it strikes the best balance. It doesn't necessarily have the best naval. It doesn't necessarily have the best diplomacy. It doesn't necessarily have the best ground combat, but all of those things work okay. And the whole system, minus the options, right? If you're just learning it, don't play with the options. Minus the options, the system's pretty straightforward. It's not that complicated. A lot of the things that people hate about Whiff, like gearing limits and stuff like that, which is granted a giant pain in the wad to keep track of, those are all options. You don't have oil. Same deal. You don't have to play with that stuff. If you want to play with that later on, go ahead. This is a lifestyle game. You can absolutely be one of those people that just plays Whiff. There are those people. I would love to know why this isn't ever played at Winterfest. So maybe we can talk about that for next year, because between you, me, and another person that we both know, That's enough to play with. That it is a great convention for that. You can get a long way into a whiff game. And the vassal modules are very good too. So we learned the game on, and I'm rusty on as hell on this personally, but the tabletop's edge was in fact the other mystery shopper that I was talking about. So yeah, if we want to do 2024 Winterfest with Whiff, I'd be completely delighted to do that. And I think we could probably get some extra people as well. Why are my things making noise? What is going on here? That is that stupid Google thing picking up my voice. That's very annoying. I don't know how to turn it off because I haven't had the time to look into how to turn it off. So, so again, personal recommendation. I think the best balance of complexity versus detail plus modularity. I think that ends with Whiff, and it has like only a couple of other things on this list do. It has a prologue. That game is Days of Decision. This is the current version of Days of Decision, Days of Decision 3. This is a pre-war political game that runs from 1936 to whenever. You could play this standalone, by the way, and actually play out the whole war in Days of Decision. I don't know why you would do that, but you could. I think I would personally would feel pretty unsatisfied by that, but there's probably people that have done it. But it integrates with Whiff pretty well. Days of Decision 3 is not quite up to the standard of the collector's edition, but I think it's close enough that you can fudge the details, and I think it'll be fine. I don't think this is a particularly interesting game as a standalone game, I gotta say. I think it works wonderfully as a prologue to Whiff, but that highlights another aspect of Whiff that I should talk about, which is that Whiff is a sandbox. Whiff can go wildly ahistorically in any number of ways, and it's a lot even easier for that to happen if you are playing with Days of Decision, where you might have a radically different political environment in September of 1939 or whenever the war breaks out versus what there was historically. Minor countries could be aligned completely differently. There's a lot of things that can happen in this. It's a little bit structured in that you have like these option cards and you have a pretty limited number of those option cards. But it still opens Whiff up to being like really, really, really wide open for ahistorical things to happen. This is, of course, a Roger McGowan cover, by the way. And in fact, that's a Roger McGowan cover too. So I mean, Whiff is my choice in this space for that level of detail. It's not the only game on this list that I own. I actually don't have a copy of Days of Decision. I should probably get on that. Next, we have Pacific Victory. This is another Columbia block game. And this is a Tom Douglas design. I want to say that this was based on an earlier game just called Victory that was like one of those non-specific where we're like, yeah, it's World War II. We kind of made the map up. And I played that and I'm like, I actually like the way this works, but I don't like the fact that we're playing on a fictional map. I'd like to play on the actual like real world map. And that's basically what this is. This is the more recent second edition. Now, this is the one you can get now. I haven't played this, but I have played the system in the earlier edition. I think it works pretty well. And I would be curious to try and update it. And that was a long time ago. I would be curious to try an updated version of it. Avalanche Press. This is the best image of this turd that I could find. I don't know that this is a turd, but it does not have a good reputation. This is John Prados' Third Reich, which is interestingly named because John Prados is not credited as the designer of this thing. The credited designer is Brian Nipple, who's done a number of other things that are reasonably well thought of. But this is basically it's clearly a response to Third Reich, but it's a complete redesign. It goes to the buckets of dice system that people just didn't like. Again, there's nothing really wrong with that, but it tends to be an unpopular mechanical choice. It's also grotesquely unattractive. I mean, really, it's really bad looking. It's my opinion that Avalanche Press usually has counters that are at least okay and usually has maps that are absolutely ghastly, and these are no exception. I'm going to slot in another game on that topic because I forgot about it, so it's not on the list. So we're going to talk about that. This is John Freitas' Third Reich, and its Pacific companion game, also designed by Brian Nipple, The Great Pacific War. Let's talk about Absolute Victory. Absolute Victory is a Compass Games design. It is an events-driven World War II game that covers the entire planet. And I am embarrassed to say I forgot about it until I started talking about how ugly the Avalanche Press maps were, because the maps in Absolute Victory are really ugly. However, the game looks pretty good, and it's got like this huge events book with hundreds of events that can potentially, dramatically shape the game. It looks. I haven't played it. I've been enticed to play it on a number of occasions, and it looks really interesting. I'm sorry that I do not have a picture of Absolute Victory, but you can go look it up on BGG or just go buy it from Compass. Their sale prices are active now. Mike Anthony says that about 1/3 of Avalanche Press maps are okay. That may be, but those are obviously the 1/3 that I never owned. So, I mean, it's not the ugliest looking map ever. Okay, I don't know that it's close to the ugliest map ever, but it's ugly. It's if they just hadn't done the impassable mountains that way, it actually would improve that map a lot. But it really is. Oh God. Oh, Stigley, you're killing me here. You're killing me, man. Oh my God, I'm gonna demonetize over that. I do not remember the era of Avalanche Press having better maps. Yeah, this is what I'm saying. I think the map art, the basic map art is okay, but then they put like these thick black lines everywhere because the map covers, it's like a 3-map game, but the 3 maps cover the entire planet, including Antarctica. So the scale is such that you need these like impassable mountains all over the place. And they use these like just thick black flat lines to separate the impassable mountains. It's bad. I don't think that even the TSR edition of Terrible Swift Swords map, as ugly as it is, I do not think is the ugliest map I have ever seen, and I'm not sure it's in the bottom 5. Good question. Good question. I'd be curious to talk to somebody who's played these Avalanche Press games to kind of get a better sense of how they work, and maybe thereby get a better sense of why the they really did not take off. And in fact, you can find this on deep discount for anywhere that has it in stock. And don't forget, if I haven't mentioned it, Ardwulf 15 code for Noble Knight. So use that all month. Now we get to the I think the definitive Pacific War experience. Okay, and again, I take that statement in the context of what Empire of the Sun is. If you want more operational detail, then Empire of the Sun may not satisfy you. But it does cover the entire Pacific War. It can be played in a sitting. It is a brilliant game. It is a brilliant distillation of the ideas that Mark first laid down in Pacific War and in other things. I think this is probably one of the 10 best war games of all time. It is a marvelous game. It is not particularly complicated. And again, I think the rule book is a little more challenging than it needs to be, but I don't think it's problematically difficult either in the rules or in the rule book, frankly. This is the Mediterranean, the third game in the Struggle for Europe series from Clash of Arms. And it has a very radically different looking cover style than the other 2 games, which I dislike, although the cover itself is, I guess, okay, although those are kind of weird looking pyramids, and it looks like that individual in the Stahlhelm has been waxed. But other than that, it looks fine. 2WW, The War in Europe. This is from One Small Step. This came out quite a while ago. I don't know that I got a date for it. And it is basically a game along the same lines of Hitler's War in terms of scale, but it's considerably simpler. And I would be very curious to see what the play time is on this, because like I said before, I felt like for the amount of of detail that you're getting, I felt like Hitler's were ran too long, which is a common feature of a lot of that era's Avalon Hill games, right? But I'd be curious to see something at that scale that plays a lot faster. We're going to get to something that plays a lot faster, but it's much more abstract. Um, Jeff Beeler asks, uh, no, I think Gleam of Bayonets is very slightly less ugly. I'll say that. I've got Gleam of Bayonets. I think it's not a good looking map. There's no doubt about that. But again, that's kind of an apples and oranges thing. Is like which turkey is a bigger turkey, Jeff asks, do Warplan Orange based war games count as strategic World War II war games? There's not that many, so I don't think I needed to address that question. There's two that I can think of. There's one of the many alternate history products from Avalanche Press, and there's Plan Orange by Mark Herman, which is an adjunct to Empire of the Sun. To be honest, although I know that BGG lists them as independent games, that and South Pacific and the new and Burma, all of those just go in my Empire of the Sun box, and they are basically, to me, additional fully fleshed out scenarios with their own components of Empire of the Sun. So no, I mean, yes, in the broad sense, but I didn't include them on any of these lists. Yes, we have Duck Overlord. Welcome back. We have already mentioned and covered Axis Empires. That got an enthusiastic recommendation from me, by the way. This may well be true. I mean, I'm not making the argument that it is an attractive map. Okay. Ooh, that's a good one. Cataclysm. Good call. This is one of the rare World War II all of World War II in a box games. There's really not that many. Most games have most of the things we've been talking about either cover Europe or cover the Pacific, or there's two games that you could put together to cover both. Cataclysm does cover both. It is almost two games in one. I played Cataclysm once at an Origin with the guys from the Player's Aid, actually, and I did not enjoy it. I would be willing provisionally to give Cataclysm another try, however. But I can't really speak to it all that much. I'll say the pieces are fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the game. I like the fact that it is modular, so you could play just Europe or just the Pacific. I like the sandbox feel. I just didn't. The mechanics did not gel for me. Here we are with A World at War, latest incarnation, now in its third edition with GMT. Of the venerable Third Reich system, and this is the direct descendant of Third Reich. However, this game has a good number of fans, to the point where they have a big tournament at WBC every year where, I don't know, 15, 20 people play this all week. And they play exactly one game, by the way. This is an extremely complicated game. I am aware that isn't necessarily a strict reflection of the fact that it is a 240 plus page rule book, which it is, but it is nevertheless an enormously complicated game. It is yet another descendant of Third Reich, in which it has been play tested for many years. Many problems have been unearthed, and those problems have been addressed with additional situational rules. And that is where the bloat in this thing comes from, is all these different situational rules, many of which might come up once a game or might not come up at all. But you need to know the situational rule so that you can identify that situation when it does come up. So that's not like a free parking, right? You still need to be familiar with even the situational rules, even if you're not so familiar with them that you don't need to look them up when they do come up. So I think this is a very strong game, but it is monstrously complicated. It is very challenging to learn unless you have a teacher. The rule book is one of those rule books that is simply not designed to learn the game from. That's a completely reasonable decision for the designer or developer, or whoever made the decision, to make, right? You didn't have to say, we want anybody to be able to learn to play this game from this book. That's not necessarily the case. Enrico Romero, welcome to the stream. Um, but while it's in principle not impossible to learn to play this, I mean, it's not easy, and I salute anybody inclined to try. So another game I didn't put on the list because I think it exists a bit outside of this space, that of the games we've been considering, but I'll talk about it now, is Quartermaster General. And Quartermaster General is less like Risk than it appears. Okay. It is fundamentally a game about logistics and logistics pipelines. So in a way, I think the answer to the question that Doug has mentioned here is, in fact, Quartermaster General. And there's a Quartermaster General World War One now too, which I have not played, but which some people have told me is better than the World War II one. It's a lot of very clever mechanisms. It is best played with, I think it's 5 or 6 people, so it's a multiplayer game. Therefore, it's a little harder to organize, but it doesn't take a million years to play. It's probably 4 or 5 hours to play through it. It's very clever. It is not. It's a blocks game. You're moving, there's like land blocks and naval blocks, and you place those in spaces. There's not like a hex grid or anything like that. It's not a detailed, there's no attempt to be a simulation there. But I think that Quartermaster General is actually a pretty strong game. This is another one that I didn't put on the list. We're kind of close to the end here, I think. Is Unconditional Surrender. Salvast is Unconditional Surrender. That's a pretty strong game, I think. There's some things about first of all, let me thank Dale Brady. Thank you very much, Dale Brady. If I was stuck on a desert island with one game covering the entire war, for me, it would be World in Flames, because World in Flames does it all, except the research. It doesn't do the research. I mean, it's in the game because it's built into the way the force pools evolve, but you don't have much to say about it. You don't have a lot of interesting decisions to make about it. That is one way in which a World at War, which is a very intricate research system, improves on the model. It's the thing that the competitors typically lack. There's another exception that we'll get to in a minute here. At least I hope we will. I get some water here because it looks like I had more material to talk about. I did say I've got fewer games to talk about, but I played a lot more of them. So, um, Vince Ree asked if I put GMT's Hitler's Reich into this category. Yes, except that I haven't played it at all. I haven't really looked at it. I can tell you that it does not have a great reputation, but that reputation seems to have been based on a rule book, which is pretty sloppily done. They have since produced what is said to be a far better edition of those rules. So for those who own Hitler's Reich, maybe give it a second look with that new rule book. It would be my recommendation. Yes, but World War II Barbarossa to Berlin does not cover the entire war in Europe, does it? Because it's 1941 to 1945. That was enough to exclude it from the list. And there's a number of games like Fall of the Third Reich and things like that didn't make this list, and I didn't even think about putting them on because they only cover part of the conflict. So, a World at War, I think it's a very strong game. There's a lot of challenges to deal with, but there is a good community. Bruce Harper has a YouTube channel. He does occasional instructive videos. I wouldn't go so far as to call them tutorials, but he's done occasionally illuminating videos about it. I think if you are looking for your game to be the strategic level World War II game, this is a pretty good choice. It covers the entire world. It's got really good diplomacy, a lot of detail in the research. I think that you could be very well served by this. It also has the prologue. Now, the prologue in this case is broken up into 2 pieces: Gathering Storm and Storm over Asia, which is exactly what it sounds like. This is, I think, 36 or 35 to 39. Again, in Europe and in the Pacific, both Bruce Harper designs. I have both of these games along with World at War. I have looked through Gathering Storm. I can't make heads or tails of it. The rule book is another one of these things. You really want somebody to teach you to play the game, and it's supposed to be not that complicated, but the rule book is not designed to teach you the game. And in fact, there's very little material in this box to tell you how to set up the game. That's kind of a problem. By all means, watch Callendale's video on this subject. You will probably be entertained by it. Um, but again, it includes the prologue, right? Which is another thing that maybe you want in a World War II game. Has the potential to dramatically change the tenor of the following World War II, but there you go. So here we have Triumph and Tragedy and Conquest and Consequence, the Pacific Volume. I played Triumph and Tragedy, I think, 3 times, and Conquest and Consequence once. These are very good games. These are block games designed by designer Craig Basink, who is, a block guy. Um, it is very sandboxy. It does take into account research in a fairly low granularity way. I think it's card play. It's a card driven game, but not a conventional card driven game. You use the cards to like do activations on the map, but you also use the cards to do diplomatic actions. It plays really well. I think playtime probably is a little longer than I'd like it to be on both of these games. One of the things that I was concerned about with Conquest and Consequences it's starting in 1935 or 36 or whatever it is. It's 36. It's like, okay, so the Marco Polo Bridge incident hasn't happened yet. Other than what's going on in China, there can't possibly be that much to do to keep players engaged in the Pacific, right? It turns out I'm wrong. There's plenty to keep players engaged in that game. Conquest and Consequence, I think, is just as good as the other one with different challenges because of the different balance of forces. Much more naval in the Pacific, obviously. These are, I think, both of these are in print with GMT right now. This is in like its second or third printing. This is a very good game. Both are very good games. I wouldn't hesitate to play either of these or both again. The Pacific War. Did I get the details on this? I didn't. That's too bad because the designer of The Pacific War from Lock and Load Publishing is a Japanese designer, which is why I was interested in this game in the first place. I had it at one point. I don't have it anymore. So I unfortunately cannot tell you who the designer was because I didn't look it up previously. This is a pretty high level, pretty abstract game about the war in the Pacific. Basically, completely ignores or at least abstracts out the land game. I believe, Ken, I believe you're right about this. I think that Whiff gets it closest, but I won't say that that is a completely satisfying answer either. So the Pacific War, it's a reasonably interesting looking game. It's a reasonably light game. And I think I traded it away for something. I think that was it because it was like just sitting around. It did look interesting to me, so I a bit I think this is a broad argument, but I mean I see the logic behind it. Downfall from GMT. Yeah. Okay. So that I believe is mid 43 to the end of the war. I think. And that's the same thing. Like if you're stopping in, starting in 42 or 43, I'm just not putting it in this category. These might be very good games. Downfall is Chad Jensen's game that's been finished by John Butterfield. Fall of the Third Reich is a Ted Racer game. I have that. It looks good. I've heard very good things about it. But I didn't include those because I think they're not in the same category at the level that I'm conducting the discussion at. And as Ken mentions, War of the Suns is on sale now at MMP as a Ziploc version. I didn't consider Fleet Commander Nimitz either because I feel like Fleet Commander Nimitz is maybe I don't know enough about Fleet Commander Nimitz. Maybe I should have, in fact, included it on this list. This is a reasonable argument to make too. These are not necessarily situations that you can describe in something that'll fit on an index card, right? So this is also a reasonable interpretation of events, I believe. Jeff Beeler says War of the Sun sold out. That's interesting. I wonder if that means the box version sold out too. If so, you're welcome, MMP. Here is Pacific Tide from Compass Games, designed by Gregory M. Smith, the actual machine designing 102 games a year. Unlike a lot of Greg's designs, which are solitaire games, this is in fact a two-player game. This is, I think, a good, light, fast playing Pacific War solution. It is a more or less card driven game, similar to the standard card driven model, but not exactly. Um, and while I haven't played my copy, it looks good, and I've heard good things about it. And I certainly think there's room for a game on this topic that you could play in a couple of hours, as opposed to making a giant project out of it. Speaking of that, Struggle for Europe from Worthington Games. This is by Grant and Mike Wiley. This I did some. Did I do a video on this? I don't know that I did a video on this. I did an unboxing video of it. So this is a pretty abstract game. Actually, Fucko and I played this. I think we actually played it twice. So it's a pretty abstract game. It's a point-to-point map. You use cards to do movements and activations and stuff like that. And while at the end of the day, after having played it, I said to myself, I'm not sure this game is for me. But damn it, if it does not do exactly what it says on the box, which is to give you World War II in Europe in 2 hours, and in both games, it came down to the last turn to determine who the winner was. So while this really isn't my style, I think this is a pretty good game. And for those who were asking about what is a good entry level strategic level World War II game here, unless you go to Axis and Allies, you can go to Walmart and buy. I think this is a very good game, and I think it's still available from Worthington as well. And I'd rather give money to Worthington than Hasbro too. Struggle for Europe is based on Lincoln. I think I'm not familiar enough with Lincoln to say. I think based on might be a little too strong. Inspired by, I will certainly agree with. Good catch, Bob Moriarty. Europe Engulfed and Asia Engulfed. 2 block games from GDW. GMT, both long out of print, and I think they're not going to get reprinted. They're on the we will not reprint list from GMT, which is too bad. They're pretty well regarded. They go for okay money on the secondary market. They're both traditional Tom Douglas mechanic block games. We may go a little over tonight, by the way. We still have a giveaway, so stay tuned for the giveaway. We'll do that. I guess we'll do that now. Actually, I should have done that a couple minutes ago with Lock and Load. So let me hide this and pull up the thing here. Okay. So we have, as our giveaway, thanks to the generous support of Lock and Load Publishing, a copy of Tank on Tank Westfront. This is a game that I've seen get quite a lot of play at Origins with the Armchair Dragoons folks. It is a great introductory war game. Obviously, it's tactical. It's got very nice pieces, very nice map. It's easy to play. Complexity on their scale is 3. Solitaire suitability is 7. It's a very good entry level game, or just like a beer and pretzels game that you sit there and play after you've been playing more complicated stuff for the last 14 hours. So we will be giving away Tank on Tank Westfront, and the keyword for that is #tanks. So put your entries in now for #tanks. And so this one, unlike all the other giveaways that we have, will get actually shipped out by me. So thanks very much to David Heath from Lock and Load Publishing, who has kindly donated several things that we will be giving away throughout the month for the various live streams. So thank you, David. And I've said this before, but I'll go ahead and say it again. Lock and Load is a company that I wish I liked more. And what I mean is that topically, a lot of their games aren't my thing, but I think they're doing a really good job in so many ways. They're like getting it right with social media and with working with content creators and with new media and with computer adaptations of their games. They're making a lot of good moves, and I'm just not that into modern tactical stuff. So much of what they do is modern tactical. They do have some exceptions. There are some exceptions, though. One of which is the Trial of Strength, which God knows where that's at. But the other of which is Triumph and Glory, the new Napoleonic system, which I am very interested in seeing how that works out. Now, the first volume of that is Peninsular War stuff. Supreme Commander did not get mentioned. I'll talk about that since I don't have an image of it. I'll talk about that. And then when I'm done talking about Supreme Commander, we will draw for Tank on Tank West Front. So Supreme Commander is a Dan Holt design, World War II in Europe, that released with huge problems. There was a refit kit to address most of those problems, but one of the things that the refit kit didn't fix were the artifacts on the map that give you nonsensical connections between areas. So there's a refit kit. There are some fans of Supreme Commander. It doesn't look terrible. Physically, it looks nice, I think, actually. But there's some issues there that I think make it kind of go down on the list below a lot of other things that I would rather play. I did not mention Across the Pacific. I will, however, talk about Unconditional Surrender, which I didn't really get to. So that's a Sal Vasti designed World War II in Europe, beginning to end. And it's a very good game in a lot of ways. It also has a slightly weird looking map because of the map projection that was chosen, but the map projection that they chose was the right one. Yes, it makes Scandinavia look weird, but it makes Scandinavia fit on the map and be the right size. So I am happy with that concession. The way the sort of integrated land, sea, air combat works, I think is really cool. What I don't like about the game is I don't like the diplomacy, and I don't like the fact that it takes longer than I'd like it to take to play. It's like a 50-hour game. And that's a lot. I want a robust diplomacy system and a lot more detail if I'm going to spend 50 hours at it. And WIF gives me that, and Unconditional Surrender does not. Nevertheless, I think the core mechanic of Unconditional Surrender is awesome, and I think it works really well. And you can see that. And also, let me say that the scenarios for Unconditional Surrender are among the best teaching scenarios I have seen. And I think that's Sal Vasta because there's very similar teaching scenarios in the Axis Empires games as well. Last chance to put in your hashtag tanks to win this fabulous shrink-wrapped copy of Tank on Tank West Front from Lock and Load Publishing. I mean, obviously, come on. Oh, so if I haven't mentioned this, in addition to all the hubbub that we're doing this week, I am planning on featuring theme month in November, Napoleonic November. There's going to be a lot of Napoleonic content. I don't know how much extra content that will equate to, but at minimum, we will have Napoleonic topics on the streams, and we will have Napoleonic unboxings on the unboxings, and I'm hoping to get a couple other things in that pipeline as well. All right, I am about to draw the number. Last chance, 10 seconds. I'm going to finish drinking this scotch, and then we will draw. All right, I'm hitting the button. Matt Taylor is the winner of Tank on Tank West Front. So, Matt, you need to email me. Mention in the subject line that you won Tank on Tank West Front, please. Email me at ardwulfslair@gmail.com. The email address is in the ticker at the bottom, and send me your mailing address with your proper name. This is a problem that we had on an earlier shipment where somebody gave me his YouTube name, which wasn't his mailing address name, and the post office returned it. And it was a big headache. So let's not do that again. So yes, Matt Taylor, congratulations, and send me your infos, and I will get this out to you in the next couple of days. There will be at least 2 giveaways next week. There might be 3, but we'll see what shows up. But pretty much that's going to be the October thing, is that there's going to be giveaways in most of the live streams of this month. So let's get back to very close to the end of the list here. Dicenso, Conquest and Consequence, War in the Pacific from White Dog Games. This is a pretty recent release. This was like a 2021 game, I think. Nice cover, nice simple cover. I like that. I will say that I disfavor the practice of poaching names that were already used by other games on the exact same topic, which is the case here. Um, it's a good title, but they could have come up with something more creative. That said, I mean, this is going to be a game that looks like a white dog game, right? It's going to be one map, probably a half size map, probably point to pointer areas, and it's probably not going to be a very dense game counterwise or anything like that. So I can't really tell you much about it other than that. Other than that, I do kind of like the cover actually. The the stark simplicity of it, I think, is pretty good. Brian Jarvis, fear not. There will be a lot of additional giveaways throughout the course of the month. And of course, you can all take advantage of the fabulous Ardwulf 15 discount code now available through Noble Knight Games. So thank you also, Noble Knight Games, if I didn't say that earlier. And thanks to Columbia Games. I hope I said that already, but maybe I didn't. I mean, normally they won't. I get so at the old place, this is of course happening now, but we just moved, so it's understandable. I was getting mail from the previous occupants that had owned the house for 20 years and the previous occupants before them who had owned the house in the previous 20 years. So my assumption would be that the post office doesn't really care much about the exact name that it's addressed to. But this particular individual that I was trying to ship something to, apparently it was a problem. What it was a Oregon Laminations corner rounder. And so what I would do when I was doing those as giveaways, what I would do is I would just get your info and have them ship it to you, right? I mean, that way I don't have to worry about it. And so like they called me on the phone. Oregon Laminations call. I'm like, who the hell, suspected spam from Oregon. I'm like, who the fuck is this? And like, oh, it's Oregon Laminations. I'm like, really? What can I do for you? And it turns out it was the corner rounder that had been returned to them. So what they did was they were totally cool about it. What they did was they shipped it to me, and then I figured out what address I was supposed to ship to and got that down to the correct person. So they did eventually get their corner rounder. No enemies here. Welcome, Dan, to the stream. You have missed all the giveaways. Sorry, and we're about to all go home and pass out for the night. So we are running a couple minutes late. So let me briefly, and we got to all the games that I specifically wanted to talk about, and I left quite a few off this time, but that was partly by design because I was able to focus a little bit more on games that I've played, much more so than on North Africa, where I've played like 2 games ever. So I'm going to talk about the schedule. I will remind folks that there will be a patrons only live stream, probably for an hour, maybe 90 minutes. I don't know, it might be 2 hours. That is scheduled for October 20th. You can become a patron for as little as $1. So, if you want to participate in the Ardwulf Con discussion, feel free to stop by that stream. A couple days later, something like that, I will release it so everybody can see it and I can get additional comments. I just want to bounce ideas off people, that kind of thing. So what's scheduled for the month? I have the one thing that's like not lined up yet is the gameplay video, which again is BCS AirCore. And that's because I don't have this space done because all this shit just showed up in the 10 minutes before we started streaming. But I've got Traveler Tuesday videos lined up for the whole month. I have Harn videos, 1 a week, lined up for the whole month. I've got the usual unboxing stuff. I've got 2 interviews, one this week, one that will be the conversation with our good buddy Harold Buchanan. For next week, I have a storage solutions video that is also contingent on me actually finishing the storage on L'Abitide de Quatre Bras. So we've got a lot to do. We should have a pretty full, aggressive schedule of live streams. And there is, I don't know if this is going to happen or not, because it's gotten rescheduled several times. But me, Mark Herman, and Fred Serval are supposed to get together and do like a teach and play of Pacific War. And currently that is scheduled for October 9th, but it has gotten rescheduled. I had to reschedule it, and then something came up for Mark. So I'm looking forward to that. That is actually the secret thing that I want to wait to do my Pacific War review for, is actually those 2 sessions. We have a classless character stream scheduled for the 16th. Which is going to be sort of part 2 of our Why We Left Playing D&D stream. That show went over pretty well as well. I don't know if there'll be giveaways for that. I think there will be at least one giveaway on that stream as well. And then we've got the usual stuff. We'll be doing remote show with Dan tomorrow at 7:30 Eastern. So do tune in for that. And we will pick a topic as usual at the last minute. So I should interview Richard Luschek. That's a great idea. I should interview Tom Doglish. I have actually interviewed Tom Doglish before in print about 25 years ago. I'm sure, Tom's a nice guy. So Charles Latour says White Dog's War in the Pacific, Hex's sort of 208 counters, which is pretty big for a White Dog game, actually. Counters 591 map, 12-page rules. I don't know. No, I'm not parsing the dollar sign there, Charles. I'm not sure what's going on with that, but 12-page rules sounds very manageable, as most of those print on demand games are. I don't recall off the top of my head. I want to say the address I was shipping to was in Florida in this case, but Zanesville does suck. So I didn't mention. Did anybody answer my question? Does USN cover the entire war in the Pacific? Because I didn't think so, but I could be wrong. I did forget Compass's Blitz. That's a good point. I also forgot Absolute Victory and had to shoehorn it in at the end. Blitz is basically an extremely stripped down World in Flames sort of I wouldn't cross it with Axis and Allies. I'd say I'd more cross it with Absolute Victory. Actually, I think the scale is actually a little more similar. Okay, this makes sense. This makes complete sense. Well, I mean, the decisive periods are over by 43, so maybe that makes sense, but I guess that we'll use that as my official excuse. So I guess I'll mention again that the Patriots Only stream on the 20th is going to be on the subject of a potential Ardwulf con, which may be 2024, but it could be 2023. It kind of depends on what how the ideas shake out. I'll also mention that there's a new shirt available. I don't have to show it off yet. I'll show it off when mine actually shows up. There is a new shirt available in the merch store, so do check that out as well. I would definitely be remiss if I didn't say big thanks to all the folks who have very generously supported the show tonight. So thank you very much for all of that. That is going to help a great deal to help me manage the very difficult task of managing to get to Compass Expo. So thank you so much for that. And don't forget that Dan is welcome to come down to Ardwulf if that is the thing that happens. So, I mean, bear in mind that this might be something that we do right outside. So, there'll be an attendance cap if that's the case. And I won't set that cap. My wife will set that cap. So damn it. I did forget these. And these are direct answers, I think, to Third Reich. I think in a good way. These are Ernie Copley designs. There's the War Europe and the War Pacific. The only bad thing I have to say about them is the titles, because good luck finding those on BGG. I haven't played these yet, but they're very interesting looking games. They stick pretty closely to the Third Reich model without succumbing to the monstrous bloat of a world at war. They don't have as much detail on research and the pre-war options as a world at war, but that's not necessarily the end of the world either. These look like very credible strategic level World War II games to me, and I actually would like to try them very much. And that may even happen at Compass Expo. I'll have to reach out to Ernie and see if that's a thing that is happening. I should. That's true. John is the person who helped with the channel art, not the original logo, but the new banners and stuff. And I'll eventually have a physical banner for that. But that ain't happening by Compass Expo because that's like a month away. So we don't have to deal with, yes, you're right, but we don't have to deal with this because we're there in February and no one else is. So, okay, folks, we are calling it an evening a wee bit late, but if we run a little bit over this month, that's fine. So I'd like to thank everybody for stopping by. I'd like to thank everybody for all the support. Thanks very much for the great discussion. Enrique Romero says, should you try Advanced Third Reich before World at War? I think the better idea is to try regular Third Reich before a World at War, because regular old Third Reich will actually teach you how to play the game, teach you the basics of it. Then you'll pick up a World at War very much easier. That is my advice on this question. Although I like Advanced Third Reich, I think Advanced Third Reich has had a pretty good balance of complexity versus detail. This is also theoretically possible. Not so much now. I think we've gotten. I've been going to Winterfest for like 6 years, 6 or 7 years, and I think we've gotten snowed in like once. So, on the other hand, there's the. We could totally do this. There's the parking lot, which is a total skating rink in pretty much the entire time. All right, folks, we're calling it a night. Once again, thanks everybody. We'll be back, of course, next week. We'll be on tomorrow. Fingers crossed. Let's see what technological challenges we have to overcome with Dan tomorrow. That's at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, and then we'll have a full slate of videos the rest of the week, and hopefully even something on Saturday, pre-recorded if I get that done as well. So once again, thanks everybody, and have a great night.